in this video, I'll be answering a question asked by someone. This question says, in layman's language, can you define B1, B2, T1, and T2 bars, and how their placement occur over the slab? So, T1, T2, B1, T2 are just a connotation given to the reinforcement in a slab. So in a slab, there are 4 different layers of reinforcement. So those reinforcements are the ones that are giving those names. So I'll just explain it in this video and use a structural drawing to explain how these reinforcements are being arranged. So the B1 can also be called BB, that is bottom reinforcement. The bottommost reinforcement in a slab is called the B1 or the BB, that is bottom reinforcement. Now then we go to the B2. The B2 is the reinforcement on the B1. Now the B2 can also be called bottom top. That is, you can call it B2 or BT. That is bottom top. That is the reinforcement on the top of the B1. Now this reinforcement is a distribution bar in a one-way slab. But in a two-way slab, it is a member. That is, the B1 and the B2 are member in a two-way slab. Then we go to the T1. The T1 can also be called top reinforcement. That is TT. It is the toppermost reinforcement in the slab. The reinforcement are run over the beam, over the reinforcement of the beam from one panel of a slab to the other panel of a slab. That is the T1 of the reinforcement. That's the T1. Then we have the T2. The T2 can also be called the top bottom. That is TB. You can call it TB, T2, or top bottom. Is the reinforcement is a distribution bar that distribute the T1. It is always at the bottom of the T1. Now let me explain this in a structural drawing. So I'll be using this drawing to explain what I just said, to explain what these 4 layers of reinforcement means. So I'll be using this layout. This is the first floor layout drawing. So I'll be using this part. I'll just pick a panel. I'll pick the panel between the grid line 2 to 3 and grid line A to C. So from here, before you can arrange the reinforcement in a slab, you need to ask yourself, where is the longer span and where is the shorter span? That's the longer side and the shorter side. So from this, the shorter side is the one that have the short beam, and the longer side is the one that have the long beam. So the reinforcement is always arranged firstly across the shorter span. So let's go to the first floor slab detail. So from the first floor slab detail, you can see the reinforcement is arranged across the shorter span first. That is the B1 or the bottom reinforcement, the BB. It is always arranged across the shorter span. Now, when you come to the collar, you see 18 12 mm reinforcement. The bar mark is 2. Then the spacing is 250 B1. That is bottom. That's the first reinforcement. After that, you need to arrange another reinforcement on it, which is the one I label 9. Now that's the B2. You call it the bottom top. Is the B2. So, and the call out, I label it as 12 numbers of 12 mm reinforcement. The bar mark is 9. The spacing is 250, and it is the B2. That is bottom top reinforcement. So after that, the T1 is the one I label 14. Just like I said, it's drawn from one panel to another panel. Now, where is the T2 on this panel? I don't have T2 on this panel, right? Because I don't usually have T2 on my slab. Instead, I put it out that what you should use. So on this one, it is a distribution by 12 mm at 250 center to center. So any red line you see on this drawing is the reinforcement. Now, if you are watching this video to the end, kindly know that this connotation, what they mean on the suspended floor, is different from what they mean on a raft floor. So I said the B1 is the bottommost reinforcement, is the bottom reinforcement in the suspended floor, because the drawing I just used to explain is the suspended floor. But on a raft floor, if you are doing a raft foundation and you have a raft slab, the reverse is the case of what I just explained from the suspended floor. So the reverse is the case for a raft and a raft floor.